You may have clicked on this video and assumed that you were going to get some super dark, manipulative trick of how you can profit off other people's pain and make money in a super unconventional, borderline illegal way. And well, if that's the case, then you would be right and wrong, because I am going to teach you how to make money off the back of people's pain, but not in a dark, manipulative way. Instead, in a strategical and beneficial way where you're making money whilst helping people and changing the world in the process. Because the truth is that every business built ever has been built to solve a problem. I mean, think about it. Any business that you can think of, I guarantee has made their money through alleviating someone else's pain and solving a problem. Whether that's your local gym down the road where they solve people's problem by helping them get from out of shape to in shape, or it's a company that sells glasses that solves a problem of people having bad vision and allowing them to, well, actually see. It doesn't matter what company you look at, because every single company solves a problem and they make money when they solve people's problems. Which means that if you want to get rich, you want to make a shit ton of money, then you need to start off with the same foundational principle. And that being that money solves problems. Or another way to see it, potentially a bit of an easy way to see it, is that money is paid when pain is alleviated. So whenever you as a person has some kind of pain, whether it's you can't see and you need glasses, you are going to pay to solve that problem. The same thing applies when you're hungry, for example. You pay for food, and the chances are is that the more hungry you are, the more desperate you are for food, the more pain you have around being hungry, the more you're going to pay for food. So actually, you can just make money in proportion to how much pain or how much of a pain point you are solving, right? Which is why some of the richest companies in the world are actually pharmaceutical companies, because pharmaceutical companies solve very, very painful problems. People don't take medicine when they feel like it, and don't take medicine as a convenience. People take medicine when they desperately need it because their pain is at an all-time high. And the same thing goes with the food industry, for example. People pay a lot of money for food. The food industry across the world, I can't even imagine how big it is, but the reason it's so big is because people have a pain on a daily basis, a frequent daily basis, that they need to be alleviated, and that pain is they're hungry, and that's alleviated through buying and eating food. So I'm going to explain to you how you can identify a problem that you can solve and then create a solution around that problem and monetize that solution, therefore building a business around doing something that, number one, you love, and number two, actually helps people. And if you didn't know, my name's Callum. I run a business where I help other people create businesses through solving other people's problems. So this is right within my realm of expertise. So you're going to get an absolute masterclass here. So let's start off with the very, very basics, right? How can we identify a problem? And I'm going to give you two methods to how you can actually do this. Okay, now method one, the first method that we're going to go through, is to start with a market, or in other words, a niche, a group of people. And I'll get onto why this works so well in a minute, but the first thing you need to identify is the market or the niche that you actually are going to pick. And there's a few different kind of criteria that you can go through when it comes to identifying a market that you want to solve a problem for. So ideally, this is a market that you either understand, you have experience in, you're passionate about, you have connections in, or you just have some kind of unfair advantage within. And the reason it's so important is because having one of these factors within the market, having an advantage over one of these factors, whether you understand the market well, you have experience in it, you have connections in it, you're passionate about it, or you just have some kind of unfair advantage, is because you are then much more tailored towards that market. And the idea that we're going for here, especially with method one, when it comes to identifying a problem from the market, is that when you focus on a market specifically, you can then focus on their specific problems. All right, because it's very, very hard to just kind of pick a problem out of thin air and say, I'm going to solve that problem and turn it into a business. But what if you had a very specific group of people and it was your job to identify the problem that they all had commonly, right? It then becomes quite an easy task to identify that problem, because you're not trying to solve every problem that anyone has ever had in the world ever, but you're trying to solve a problem of a specific group of people, which can be generalized. And the thing is that markets have problems. Every single market does. Your job is to identify one of those core problems that the market has and work on building a solution for that problem. So I'll give you a fantastic example that actually puts this into perspective from someone who actually joined my inner circle. And I'm going to give you an example of a guy called Noah. Now, Noah was a farmer. He lived on a farm. His family were farmers. Everything he's ever grown up around has been around farmers. Now, when he joined me, he was in a very common situation and problem that most people were having, where he was like, I don't know what problem to solve. I don't know what skill I have first and foremost. I don't know what problem to solve. I'm just kind of here because I want to learn a skill and I want to monetize that skill. Okay. Now, the thing we started off with was actually finding a problem within a market that he understood. So instead of just trying to solve any problem ever in the world, which is incredibly difficult, we focused on what he had. Number one, he was passionate about, he had an understanding in, he had experience in, he had connections within, and he had an unfair advantage within, and that was farmers. Because again, he had grown up on a farm, he'd lived around farmers, that was his whole thing. So what we focused on doing is actually trying to understand what problems do farmers have that he could solve. And a really good way that we went about it was actually looking at within his family, right? What problems did his family have? Any problems within the farm that he was somewhat interested in that he could then go about creating a solution for. And after a lot of back and forth, a lot of deliberation, what we realized is that he actually, within his farm, managed their finances, and he managed his family's finances on the farm, because actually farming finances are incredibly complex. So long story short, we ended up building his service around helping other farmers systemize and automate their finances to basically better track their ins, their outs, their profits, their losses, their expenditures, their income, and everything, to make their life much easier, and ideally actually save them quite a bit of money on where they were missing out on a bunch of different opportunities or loopholes, or not tracking things properly, because a lot of other farmers always did it through like pen and paper. So he wanted to help other farmers automate the process. And now that's exactly what he does. That's literally his entire service, where he helps farmers sort out their finances, and as a result makes them more money, helps them save money, and now makes a lot of money through that service. And this worked so well for him because he'd already pre-validated the problem that he wanted to solve. He already knew it was a problem because he understood the industry very, very well and who he was trying to solve the problem for. And of course, if you have connections within a market, that's just a double win, because having connections means that you're kind of 10 steps ahead of other people, where you can talk directly to the person that you want to end up helping and obviously help them solve their problem. And if you don't have connections, it's not actually a big problem. All you need to do is just kind of ask around. You need to ask around to people within the market that you want to target exactly what their problems are. And it's an incredibly easy thing to do, because a lot of the time when you go to people and you say, hey, this is what I do, I love this industry, I love the space that you're in, I want to help you solve a problem. Maybe you already have a bit of a bias to what your skill set is, and you can say, hey, I'm really interested in blah, blah, blah skill set. I like AI automation, and I want to see how I can help you automate your processes with AI. That allows you to ask that question to the market that you want to help, identify their problems, and then solve their problems. Because the best way to create an offer for your business that makes you a lot of money is just to ask the people who you want to create an offer for what they need, and then build that. And then you kind of bypass all of the thinking, all of the double questioning, all of the confusion around, oh, does my offer actually mean something? Is it actually targeting the right people? Ask the people you want to help if they want that. Simple as. And the reason this actually works so incredibly well is because asking the people who you want to help exactly what they need help with allows you to then build a rapport and build a relationship with that person. And then if they were to say, hey, we could really do with this, or, you know, with an AI automation, we need this process, and this process automated. And you said, okay, cool, I'm gonna go back to the drawing board. If you came back 2 months later to that same person and said, hey, I have the solution to your problem that you had, why would they say no to that then? They've already told you that they have the problem. You've told them that you've created a solution. Then you've now come to them with a medicine that solves their pain. Very high likelihood is that they're going to then pay you for that service, for that solution, and then you've got your first client. Or if you've reached out to 10, 20, 30 different people and you've built a common problem or a solution to the problem that they all have, then you can go back to those people, and those are pretty easy clients to then close. And so just to summarize on method 1, to actually finding your problem that you can therefore turn into a business, you start off with a niche, right? Ideally a niche that fits into one of these criteria. It doesn't have to fit into all of them. It doesn't even have to fit into one of them if you don't want to, but one of these helps. You then identify a problem that the market has and build a solution around that problem. And you can do that by asking the people who you want to help exactly what they need help with. And then you kind of got like a one-stop shop solution to finding a problem that you can create a solution for, okay? That's method 1. Method 2, defining a problem that you can build a business around, starting off with a skill. And the reason that we start with a skill, that's method 2 to identifying a problem, is because when you start with a skill or a skill set or something that you know can solve a problem already, it's all just about then finding the problem that is the most important for the skill to solve. That's basically what it falls down to, right? And when I say start with your skill, in terms of what skill should you start with, it's quite similar to previously when we spoke about what method, what market do you start with, right? Ideally, you have some kind of advantage in it. Ideally, you have experience with the skill. Ideally, you're an expert in the skill, but if not, it doesn't matter. You just got to start with one that, number one, you're somewhat interested in, or number 2, this is one that you already have, right? And similar to the previous example, the reason that this is somewhat important is because if you already have the skill, it means that you don't have to go through the process of learning the skill, and you already probably know what problems it solves. Or if you're passionate about it, again, it just gives you an unfair advantage, kind of like you're able to skip 3 steps ahead in terms of someone who doesn't have a skill whatsoever and they're trying to identify it for the first time. So it just helps you be 2 steps ahead of the competition. And so your skill is basically your weapon, okay? It's the weapon that's going to allow you to get to the end point that you want to get to. It's the weapon that's going to allow you to deliver the result that you want to, right? The skill is the thing that people are inevitably going to pay money for. You just need to make sure that that skill solves a problem. Or in other words, you need to identify the beast that is best suited to take down with the weapon that you've chosen. So I'll give you an example. Let's say, for example, that your skill is SEO, search engine optimization. Now, this skill is fine, but the problem is that it doesn't really mean much until it solves some kind of problem. So it's your job to identify what what problem number one the skill of SEO solves, and also who needs it the most. So if we know that the whole idea of search engine optimization is to help companies rank higher on Google, basically to help them with lead generation, we then need to go and default back to, okay, cool. If we're helping companies rank higher on Google to help them generate more leads, we need to ask ourselves who has the problem the most, who needs that solved the absolute most, and therefore will pay the most amount of money for it. And I'm not just talking about people that would see it as a nice convenience to have SEO. I'm talking about the kind of people that wouldn't be able to live without it, because as I mentioned before, the amount that someone's willing to pay to have their problem solved is completely in relation to how painful that problem is in the first place. As I said previously, the whole food industry is massive, and the reason being is because on a daily basis, multiple times throughout the day, people get hungry and people are going to pay for food, right? And the longer someone hasn't eaten for, if they had the chance to get a pizza, right, and they had to pay for the pizza, I guarantee if the longer they haven't eaten for, the more they'll be willing to pay for that pizza. Similar thing with your service. Who hasn't eaten the longest amount of time that you can actually serve? And this is obviously just going to require some thought to really have to think about who needs it the most and go through some different industries, some different companies. I mean, ideally, you can also kind of link this to a market that makes the most amount of sense, because ideally you have some of the characteristics within certain markets, such as experience, understanding, you're more passionate about it, and you can link the two together. But if you're looking at SEO and you really want to think, okay, who needs it the most, whose business either can't survive without it, or going forward, they're going to massively struggle and they're going to be well below their competition at industry standard if they don't have it. And typically when I work with people, they'll build their business in this manner. Okay, they normally use method 2, where they start with a skill and their job is to find a problem that the skill can solve, pair the two up, and then, hey presto, they have a service and a business that they can scale. And I'll give you an example that perfectly illustrates it. So I had a guy that joined me and my team in the inner circle, and he basically came out of the corporate world in cybersecurity. He was a cybersecurity expert, or he had experience in cybersecurity, and he wanted to figure out how he could build it into his own business and monetize it himself. And he used method 2. He started with a skill that he already had, and it was his job to find a market in which had a pain point that he could solve that they would pay the most amount of money for. So after a lot of back and forth and after a lot of trying to figure it out, we ended up landing on software startups that deal with a lot of customer data. And the reason being is because if they're a startup, number one, they probably are early days. They may not have many cybersecurity implementations already within their business. And number two, if they deal with a lot of customer data, then the potential pain that they would have of losing that customer data or that customer data being hacked was much higher than like a local coffee shop. It doesn't really need cybersecurity, right? So for him, the market that we wanted to choose was a market that had the biggest potential pain point that he could solve, which in this case was softwares that dealt with a lot of customer data. So the question is, how can you find what market actually needs it the most? Now, we use a few different methods, and I typically use a few different methods when I help people figure this out. The first one is a market who can't actually live without the service that you're offering, right? So an example of this would be that if you're a website builder, you build websites for people, you optimize websites, right? Who or what industry needs website optimization the absolute most? This will typically be an industry that does all of their business through their website, right? Because if you can help them optimize their website, improve the conversion rate, they need that desperately. They cannot live without a poorly optimized website because their business does not survive. The other thing is any market in which you can then identify a clear and direct return on investment is generated through your service. So if your service that you're providing to the market doesn't generate a clear and direct return on investment for the company, it's going to be difficult for them to justify spending a lot of money on your service, which basically means that do they see it as a convenience or do they see it as an absolute necessity? And the third thing is any market that already does the thing that you're offering, but to a very, very poor level, okay? So if, for example, you're an advertisement agency, that's your service, that's what you want to provide, you can target a market or an industry that already runs ads because they have to run ads. They can't live without ads, so they already run it, but they do it to a poor standard, which means that you can actually swoop in there and help them improve that standard and raise that standard to a whole new level, okay? So these three things are the different factors that you can measure between. If the market can't live without your service, it generates a clear and direct return on investment for them, or they already do it but to a poor level or a poor standard, that is an absolute jackpot. That is probably a perfect market that you can pair your skill with and therefore have a big problem that you can solve. And that's pretty much it. Using these two methods, you can identify a problem that you can then solve. And then there's a few following steps that you would then have to take in order to turn that into a service. And that would be the likes of creating a solution delivery. So you have your market, you have your skill, you have your problem that you're solving, ideally. That means you have a service. To actually build that into an actual business, you create a solution delivery, which is basically how are you actually going to deliver that service for them. You also create an offer, which is what are you actually offering. You know, if you are, again, you have an advertisement agency and you're helping e-commerce products sell more of their products, or let's say you have a conversion rate optimization service, helping e-commerce brands optimize their websites. What is your offer? Like, what is your actual transformation that you want to help them achieve? You will help them get from where to where. That's the idea and the thing you need to figure out. And then, of course, pricing as well. Pricing is the third one. So you need pricing on your service, something that makes the most amount of sense, and obviously where you can be charged based on the value and the outcome that you help them produce as per to how long it takes you to actually deliver the service. Otherwise, you're limiting yourself by how many hours that you actually have in a day. And I'm not going to go on about this here because that's going to be another 3 hours that's added on to this video. But if you want to learn about how you can do that, so take a problem that you've now identified and actually build it into a service, into a business, I'm going to leave some links below that you can click on, that you can check out. That's really going to help you piece all of this together. Because once you have a problem that you can solve, you have a skill that you can actually solve the problem with, you have a business. It's now just about kind of like integrating the rest of the ingredients, putting it all into the mixing pot and mixing it together, and then you have a vehicle that can generate you money, which is to some people very, very mind-blowing, but honestly, it's much more simple than you think. You just have to do it. So I'm gonna leave some links at the top of the description that you can check out, where you can get some more information about how you can work with me directly. You can join my inner circle, you can work with the rest of my team, and where we can help you take any skill that you have and turn it into a cash flowing business. No income claims specifically, but we've helped some pretty amazing people achieve some pretty amazing results and have well over $500,000 in student earned income at this point. So we know what we're doing, which is pretty cool. So check out the links below, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.